Hello there, lovely fiction authors. So this week I am doing a workshop called Secrets to Infusing Every Part of Your Story with Emotion so that you can satisfy more readers, create more mega fans, and build a fiction empire. If you have not joined the workshop yet, there is still time. As of the recording of this, it's going through this Friday. And you can register and, just watch the replays from the first couple of days. You can register at bit.ly/6FS workshop, and I will put that in the show notes. If you're listening to this weeks later, then don't bother because it will have already been taken down. But what I decided to do this week is that the first training that I did is 3 mistakes that many authors are making in 2024 that are killing their sales. And a lot of times the mistakes workshops or the mistakes, trainings, recordings that I do tend to resonate with you guys. I always notice that we get a lot of downloads on those. So a lot of times I'll just put that up, the first training in the podcast feed so you can listen to it. But what I decided to do this time is to break it into kind of mini episodes. So I'm going to do 3 episodes over the next 3 days. They're only going to be 10 to 15 minutes long, so they're kind of shorty episodes, and I'll just talk about one of each of the 3 mistakes in each one. All right, so that's what we're going to do for these 3 shorter episodes. I hope you enjoy them and get something out of them. And without further ado, let's get into the mistake that we're talking about today. Do you yearn to make your living from writing fiction? Do you struggle to finish your manuscript due to block, indecision, or lack of confidence in your story? Have you already published books that just aren't getting the sales you'd like? The truth is, the thing that really makes a difference in book sales is not currently being taught in the fiction author space. And it comes from the story level, not the marketing level. Real talk, if you don't get it right at the story level, no amount of awesome marketing is going to make your book a bestseller. Hi, I'm Liesl. I've got 20 fiction books, 4 genres, the USA Today bestseller accolade, and multiple award wins under my belt. So, obviously, I've been around the block a few times. I have a lot of readers that follow me from genre to genre, even though conventional wisdom says that's rare. Why? Because my readers know that I know how to tell a story that's going to make them feel something. And if you can master that skill, you can write anything you want for the rest of your life and know it will be well received by readers, which means better reviews, more gushing, more mega fans, and best of all, more royalties for you. Grab your fuzzy slippers and your chocolate of choice. I'm going to teach you how to emotionally engineer your story into the hearts and minds of your readers on purpose. Let's go. So let's jump into mistake number 3, writing without creative guideposts. So many authors out there think that using any kind of guidepost, and by that I mean story beats, story templates, anything like that, is the worst thing you could do because they are afraid it will stifle their creativity. I hear this all the time. Has anyone ever heard that before, or maybe even thought it themselves? Don't be shy, you can tell me in the chat. For me, I can tell you that probably the most negative comment I get on ads for my services are things like, you know what, I would never do this. I don't want you telling me how to write my characters or how to influence my story, right? And people are like, shame on you for trying to control what other authors are trying to write. I get that sometimes. Not too often, thankfully, but I do get it once or twice. So
had kind of a crazy brilliance to him, and our idea was...
I'm about to debunk this belief for everybody, okay? Let me tell you why it's untrue. First of all, I want to address something I was told years ago about using templates and plot points to figure out your story. And that was that doing so isn't bad in and of itself, but you're more likely to write to a cliche. This is what was first told to me about plot points. This is an actual concern, okay? So this isn't like completely untrue. This has some teeth, and I'm going to explain something to you about it, though. What this means is that if you're using a template to try to fill in the plot events of your story, so let's just say the hero's journey, since most people are familiar with that, and you're trying to fill in the next plot point, and you say something like, okay, next my character needs to meet the mentor, according to the hero's journey, right? And then you just use the first thing that comes to mind for that plot point. You're going to end up with a story that's actually very superficial because you're just using the first thing you came up with, right? And the first thing you came up with is probably something you've seen in another story. Your conscious mind is bringing that
characters, and graphically we
recalling
went
it,
really
right,
well
in
as
memory.
was
So
you
then
know,
it becomes very
like
cliche,
grand
and it's
graphics
been
that it
done
ran.
before,
And
and
so Jeff and
it's not
I
going to
paid
evoke very much
attention,
emotion.
and
Okay,
we
you're
lit
going to
some
end up having
alarms,
a
and we
knockoff
didn't know what we
of
were doing. But
Star
again,
Wars
I
or
know I
Lord of the
talked
Rings
about this,
or
but you
something
have to
like
act
that,
like you know
right?
what you're doing.
So this is
If you
what
don't know
they
what you're
mean
doing,
when they
we
say
had a lot to learn. Suddenly we're in the
that
presence of this.
that's what they're talking about when they say write to a cliche, that you're going to end up just using the first thing that comes to mind, and it's going to be cliched, and it's not going to be terribly creative or anything like that. And like I said, this is a real concern. But here's the thing. The only way this actually happens is if you're trying to use your conscious mind to force your story into or out of a template. So most concerns people have about not using templates stem from them using their conscious rather than their subconscious minds. Even when people say, I don't want to read a particular book because I don't want to be influenced by it. Now, you can say that, you can not read the book if you want, like totally up to you. Nobody really is going to judge you one way or the other for that, but it's actually not possible to be overly influenced by another story or another author if you're writing your story from your subconscious mind. Because when you write it from your subconscious mind, even if the subject matter is similar to somebody else's, it's still going to be your unique take on it. It's still going to be coming from your unique subconscious mind, which houses your emotions, your experiences, your beliefs, your lens through which you view the world. So it's going to be uniquely yours. Okay, so if you are using your conscious mind to use a story template, then yeah, writing to a cliche is a real concern, and you have to be careful about that. But if you're using your subconscious mind, this whole problem goes away. It doesn't even exist anymore. Most people just don't realize that because they've not been taught to tap into their subconscious mind to write their stories. But when we do this, we are not going to be forcing our story into a template or using a template to try and force the events of our story, okay? We're going to be using guideposts. You know, we're going to be using the, whatever it is, the plot points, the story points, the template, we're going to be using those as jumping off points. And from there, your subconscious mind will take the reins and create something so individually unique to you that your reader can't help but feel the emotion of it. Okay? So let's talk for just one quick minute about constraints. What is the number one most obvious constraint that we all abide by in our writing? Can you tell me in the chat? Like, what's the number one thing that we all use that limits our writing in a particular way? What are the limits or rules around the stories that we write? Any ideas? Think about it this way. What is the number one way that we categorize our stories when we're writing them, and especially when we're publishing them? Genre, very good. Thank you, James. Thank you, Autumn. Genre and then tropes. But yeah, genre was pretty much what I was looking for. So let me tell you a little story. Years ago, when I was first getting into writing, I met another woman at a local chapter of our major writing organization, and she had already published a book. And this would have been, I mean, it was years ago. It was probably in the heyday of when Kindles were first a thing, and you could pop any old thing with a terrible cover and terrible editing up onto Amazon and get lots of sales, right? And I was just getting into it, so I was very envious of her that she already had a book up, and you know, I was like looking up to her as somebody who'd already done this. And I went and bought her book, and it was partly because I was really curious to see what she wrote about, and she was my friend. We went to this group together. I wanted to support her, so I went and got her book. And you guys, let me tell you, to this day, it might be the worst thing I've ever read. I love her to death, and it's not a reflection on her, but she just had no story training whatsoever. And it was, I remember, I couldn't even tell you what the plot was because there was no plot, right? I do remember that it was a fantasy, but literally the characters were bopping from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. So it was like there was, I don't know, a magic wand, and then there was an egg, and then there was a sorcerer's stone, and then there was a dragon, and then there was a unicorn, and then I mean, it just went on and on and on. And there was literally nothing that tied every event in the story together that made the story cohesive. And it was, I do think I finished it, but it was grueling to finish because I just kept thinking, even if it sucks, I'll just read it. I'll just fly over it real fast to say that I did, but it was so hard to stay in. I didn't even want to read it, right? So the reason I tell you that is because without genre, our stories are nonsensical, okay? Genre tells us what the rules or limits of the world we're writing in are. It helps us, and more importantly, our readers, make sense of our stories. And the only reason I'm pointing this out is because genre is the most broad of guideposts that we use. And I'm just trying to make the point that without that, nobody's a good writer. Not a single one of us, okay? We need certain constraints to give us the parameters that we're writing in so that our readers can make sense of our stories. You have to understand that the human brain, and we will get way more into this inside my membership and my programs, but the human brain is wired to look for patterns, to look for connections, okay? We all do it. And for some reason, us creatives, us authors, we have this tendency to think that if, for some reason, if what we write isn't completely new and unique and something that humanity has never seen before, then it has no value, okay? And obviously, nothing can be further from the truth. The best thing that you could do for your readers is to give them guideposts to help them navigate their way through your story. Genre is just one way that we do that, right? So give them the genre, give them the tropes, give them the symbolism, give them the archetypes, give them the repetition. Help them not only find, but feel the meaning in your story. Okay, this guideposts are another way, one of many, that we can infuse emotion into our story, because these things, these familiar things that have inherent meaning behind them for the reader, are a huge creator of emotion in your story. Leverage them. Don't waste them. If you can do that, if you can infuse every part of your story with emotion and then guide your reader to catharsis, you literally cannot fail as a fiction author. Remember, readers are there to feel big emotions in a safe space, to reach the catharsis and release those emotions. If you can do that with your story, it's literally impossible to fail. So I want you to imagine that story plot graph again. You know, I'm talking about the one that like goes up and up and up and up and up, and then you hit the climactic moment and then you have the falling action, right? It's like the ones that we were all shown in like, I don't know, third grade English class, right? Your job as an author is to infuse each step of that graph with emotion. So it starts low with the inciting incident, then you ratchet it up, ratchet up, ratchet up, ratchet up until you hit the emotional catharsis, which comes right around the same place as the climactic moment. And that's where they're going to release their emotions. And the falling action, like it's like a visual representation of coming down after you hit that catharsis. That, my friends, is how you tell a story. Any story about any character in the world in any genre, okay? It always applies. That is how we help our readers process emotions and become more emotionally healthy. And that is how we up-level humanity one story at a time. So here's one more quick truth bomb for you. The more constraints you write within, the more restrictions there are on your story, the better storyteller you become. I'm serious. Another typo that's supposed to say serious. I know not a lot of people believe that, and we tend to really put a lot of resistance to that, but it is the truth. The point is, if you have strict constraints on your story, you're forced to become more creative within those constraints, okay? That's why I always have to chuckle when people say things like, I refuse to use plot points because it will stifle my creativity, okay? The opposite is true. And not using these guideposts to help your reader find their way through your story really is killing your sales. You're going to end up with a story that is non-cohesive, that is unfocused, and that is unemotional. And obviously, that's a problem. And again, I'm not telling you you have to use anything strict, okay? This is just totally hypothetical, okay? You don't have to force your story into a template. You don't have to force the events of your story using a template. I'm just asking you to be open-minded when it comes to different kinds of creative guideposts. Use them as jumping off points and then hand the reins to your subconscious mind. Use them as checks and balances to make sure that you're connecting effectively with your readers, okay? But whatever you do, please, please don't disregard them. That's like massive, massive mistake.
Okay, I hope that that was helpful and that you got something out of that. Once again, if you would still like to join the workshop, you can go to bit.ly/6FS, which I will also put in the show notes. Everyone have a wonderful day and a wonderful week of writing, and I will see you next time. Thanks for listening today. If this episode helped or inspired you in any way, would you do me a solid and leave me a review? Reviews help other fiction authors find the podcast. You could also recommend it to a writer friend of yours so they can get the same inspiration you got. Remember, you have a story inside you that only you can tell. So get out there and write your soul story, because your readers are waiting for it with bated breath.